In a distant corner of the universe, far beyond what humans could see with their naked eyes, there existed an advanced alien civilization known as the Zephyrians. These beings were incredibly smart, far smarter than anything Earth had ever produced. They had mastered space travel, built cities that floated in the void of the cosmos, and ruled over hundreds of planets across the galaxy. Their empire was vast, powerful, and seemingly unstoppable. But for all their brilliance, the Zephyrians had one glaring flaw: they loved to judge others quickly. If a planet didn't look impressive enough, or its inhabitants seemed too simple, they dismissed it without much thought. To them, efficiency was everything. Why waste time on something small when you could focus on bigger, shinier things? That's how Earth came onto their radar, or rather, didn't come onto their radar. At first glance, Earth appeared unremarkable. It was just another blue-green orb, spinning quietly in the Milky Way, mostly covered by water and dotted with forests, mountains, and deserts. When the Zephyrians sent out their reconnaissance drones to scan the planet, they found nothing particularly exciting. Sure, there were signs of life, lots of creatures crawling around, but none of them looked like they posed any real threat. The drones zoomed in closer, capturing images of bustling cities filled with tall buildings, highways packed with vehicles, and people scurrying about like ants. But instead of seeing these developments as achievements, the Zephyrians scoffed. "Look at them," one of their analysts said during a meeting aboard their massive flagship. "They're chaotic, disorganized, and obsessed with pointless activities." "What kind of pointless activities?" asked another member of the council curiously. "Well," replied the analyst, pulling up footage from the drone cameras, "they spend hours every day drinking some strange brown liquid they call coffee. And then they argue over borders, fight each other endlessly, and invent weapons just to destroy each other further. Honestly, it's exhausting even watching them." The room erupted in laughter. To the Zephyrians, this behavior sounded absurd. How could anyone take such a species seriously? Drinking coffee and fighting wars, that wasn't progress. It was madness. So, after barely 5 minutes of discussion, the council unanimously decided that Earth wasn't worth their attention. There was no need to invade or conquer. Humanity was simply too primitive to matter. Little did they know, their decision would prove disastrous. Back on Earth, life carried on as usual. People woke up early, brewed pots of strong coffee, and headed off to work. Some worked in offices, others in labs, and still others in fields under the blazing sun. Among those working tirelessly was a scientist stationed at a modest observatory, tucked away high in the Andes Mountains. This person, a quiet yet fiercely intelligent individual, spent most nights staring through telescopes, searching for answers to questions few dared to ask. One chilly evening, while analyzing data collected from deep space, the scientist noticed something odd. Buried within the static of cosmic noise were faint signals unlike anything they'd encountered before. At first, they thought it might be interference from nearby satellites or equipment malfunctions. But after running test after test, the truth became undeniable. These weren't random bursts of energy. Someone or something was sending messages. Heart racing. The scientist cross-referenced the signals with star charts and recent astronomical events. The origin point traced back to a region near the constellation Orion, where no human spacecraft had ventured. Whoever was communicating wasn't human. For days, the scientists debated whether to share the discovery. After all, who would believe? Them? Governments were often skeptical of claims involving extraterrestrial life, especially coming from someone working alone in a remote location. Yet keeping the information secret felt wrong. Humanity deserved to know if they weren't alone in the universe. Finally, the scientists made a bold choice. They encoded the signal patterns into a digital file and sent it to several trusted colleagues scattered across different continents. Within hours, the news spread like wildfire among the scientific community. Researchers began piecing together fragments of the message, trying to decipher its meaning. What they uncovered chilled them to the bone. It wasn't friendly. The message was clear. Earth belonged to someone else now. The Cytherians claimed ownership of the planet and demanded immediate compliance. No explanations were offered, no negotiations proposed. It was an ultimatum, pure and simple. Panic rippled through the ranks of scientists and government officials alike. For decades, humanity had speculated about what first contact with aliens might look like. Would they be benevolent teachers offering wisdom, or hostile invaders bent on domination? Now, faced with reality, the answer seemed painfully obvious. Yet amidst the fear and uncertainty, a spark of hope remained. Humans may have been chaotic and imperfect, but they also possessed something rare: resilience. Throughout history, whenever challenges arose, humanity had risen to meet them head-on. Whether battling diseases, surviving natural disasters, or pushing the boundaries of science, people always found ways to adapt and overcome. As word of the impending invasion spread, ordinary citizens began preparing for the worst. Families stocked up on supplies, engineers brainstormed defensive strategies, and soldiers trained harder than ever before. Even coffee shops saw a surge in customers as people sought comfort in familiar rituals. Drinking coffee became more than just a habit. It symbolized determination, a refusal to give up despite overwhelming odds. Meanwhile, governments worldwide scrambled to form alliances. Old rivalries faded as nations realized survival depended on cooperation. Military leaders drafted plans for resistance, while scientists worked around the clock to develop countermeasures against alien technology. At the heart of it all stood the observatory scientist who had first detected the signals. Though initially hesitant to step into the spotlight, they now found themselves thrust into a leadership role. Their knowledge of the Cytherians' communication methods proved invaluable, helping decode additional transmissions and anticipate enemy movements. The looming threat, a sense of unity, swept across the globe. Strangers helped one another, communities rallied together, and stories of courage emerged daily. Humanity wasn't perfect, but in moments of crisis, it showed its true strength. And so, as the Cytherians prepared to make their grand entrance, little did they realize the storm they were about to unleash. By underestimating the very traits they mocked: chaos, creativity, and sheer stubbornness, they had awakened a force unlike any they'd encountered before. Earth was ready to fight back. It was a crisp morning when the sky above Earth changed forever. People were going about their usual routines: kids heading to school, office workers sipping their morning coffee, farmers tending to their fields, when suddenly the horizon lit up with an eerie glow. Massive diamond-shaped ships descended from the heavens, hovering silently over major cities like New York, Tokyo, London, and Mumbai. The sheer size of these vessels dwarfed skyscrapers, casting long shadows that sent shivers down spines. At first, many thought it was some kind of elaborate movie stunt or a new form of advertisement. But then came the broadcast, a deep, mechanical voice echoing across every television, radio, and smartphone on the planet. "Attention, inhabitants of Earth," it boomed. "Your planet is now under the control of the Cytherian Empire. Resistance is futile. Compliance will ensure your survival." The message repeated in multiple languages, leaving no room for doubt. This wasn't a drill. It wasn't fiction. Aliens had arrived, and they weren't here to make friends. Panic erupted almost instantly. Streets filled with screaming crowds as people tried to flee or find loved ones. Social media exploded with videos of the alien ships looming overhead, accompanied by frantic messages asking what to do next. Governments scrambled to respond, but the scale of the invasion left even world leaders paralyzed with uncertainty. The Cytherians, This reaction was exactly what they expected. They had studied humanity's behavior through their drones and concluded that humans were too chaotic and disorganized to mount any serious resistance. What they didn't anticipate, however, was how quickly humans could adapt when pushed to the brink. Within hours, makeshift command centers sprang up around the globe. Military bases buzzed with activity as generals pored over maps and strategized defenses. Scientists worked tirelessly to analyze the alien technology, searching for weaknesses. Ordinary citizens joined forces, donating resources, volunteering for emergency services, and spreading information online. It was messy, uncoordinated, and chaotic, but it was also effective. One group emerged as a beacon of hope. At its core was the observatory scientist who had first detected the alien signals. Working alongside a team of hackers, engineers, and military personnel, they set up shop in an abandoned warehouse near the outskirts of a major city. Armed with laptops, soldering irons, and whatever tools they could scavenge, this ragtag crew became humanity's secret weapon. Their first breakthrough came when they managed to hack into the aliens' communication systems. Using old-school methods combined with cutting-edge ingenuity, they intercepted transmissions between the Zetherian ships. One message revealed plans to disable Earth's nuclear arsenal remotely. If successful, humanity would lose its most powerful deterrent against total domination. But the aliens underestimated one crucial detail: human creativity. Instead of relying solely on digital systems, the team devised analog solutions, weapons triggered mechanically rather than electronically. These crude yet effective devices proved immune to the Zetherians' attempts at hacking. When the aliens tried to shut down Earth's defenses, they found themselves facing unexpected resistance. The first real battle took place over the skies of North America. Fighter jets armed with modified missiles clashed with sleek alien fighters. Though outnumbered and outgunned, the humans fought fiercely, using unpredictable maneuvers to evade enemy fire. Pilots pulled off daring stunts, weaving through explosions and launching counterattacks with precision timing. For every ship they lost, they took down two of the enemies. On the ground, civilians played a critical role. In urban areas, people used smartphones to track alien movements and relay coordinates to nearby defense units. Hackers infiltrated local networks to disrupt the invaders' sensors, creating blind spots where resistance forces could regroup. Even children contributed, sharing tips on social media about how to spot alien patrols and avoid capture. Despite the chaos, there were moments of triumph. A group of engineers retrofitted civilian drones to mimic the appearance of Zetherian ships, tricking the invaders into wasting ammunition on decoys. Elsewhere, farmers repurposed agricultural equipment to build makeshift barricades, slowing the advance of alien ground troops. Every victory, no matter how small, boosted morale and reminded humanity that they still had a fighting chance. Back at the warehouse, the observatory scientist led efforts to decode more of the intercepted messages. One transmission stood out a detailed blueprint of the Zetherians' flagship orbiting high above Earth. The scientist realized this ship acted as the nerve center for the entire invasion force. If humanity could strike at the heart of the fleet, they might stand a chance of turning the tide, but getting close enough to launch an attack seemed impossible. The flagship was heavily guarded, surrounded by layers of defensive ships. Any approach would require navigating treacherous asteroid fields littered with automated turrets, programmed to obliterate anything that came near. It was a suicide mission, or so it seemed. As the days passed, the Zetherians grew increasingly frustrated. They had anticipated swift submission, not prolonged resistance. Their rigid, methodical tactics were ill-suited to dealing with the unpredictable nature of human warfare. Every time they thought they had gained the upper hand, humanity struck back with renewed vigor. This frustration boiled over during a second wave of attacks. The aliens deployed devastating energy weapons, capable of leveling entire neighborhoods with a single blast. Cities crumbled and thousands perished. Yet even in the face of such destruction, humanity refused to surrender. Survivors banded together, rebuilding what they could and continuing the fight. The turning point came when the observatory scientists discovered something extraordinary. By analyzing patterns in the aliens' behavior, they identified a critical flaw in the Zetherian strategy: predictability. Unlike humans, who thrived on improvisation and adaptability, the Zetherians relied on pre-programmed algorithms and calculated moves. This rigidity made them vulnerable to surprise tactics. Armed with this knowledge, the Resistance began planning their boldest move yet. They would use deception and diversion to draw the Zetherians into a trap, buying time for a covert team to infiltrate the flagship. It was risky, but it was also their best shot at ending the invasion once and for all. As preparations got underway, the mood among the Resistance shifted from desperation to determination. People knew the stakes were higher than ever, but they also understood that giving up wasn't an option. Humanity had faced countless challenges throughout history and overcome them all. This time would be no different. In the end, it wasn't superior firepower or advanced technology that gave humanity hope. It was something far simpler: the indomitable spirit of the species that had survived wars, plagues, and natural disasters. A species that drank coffee to stay awake during late-night brainstorming sessions and argued passionately about the best way forward. A species that refused to go quietly into the night. And so, as the final phase of the plan unfolded, the Zetherians found themselves facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before, one that thrived in chaos and refused to back down, no matter the odds. With the stakes higher than ever, humanity's resistance movement began to take shape in ways no one could have predicted. It wasn't just about soldiers and scientists anymore. It was a collective effort that brought together people from all walks of life. Farmers, teachers, mechanics, baristas, and even teenagers played their part in what became known as the Great Pushback. Everyone had something to contribute, no matter how small or unconventional. The heart of this rebellion lay in its creativity. The Zetherians were advanced, but they operated within strict rules that humanity gleefully broke at every opportunity. Instead of relying on flashy technology, humans used whatever they had on hand. Old car engines were repurposed into makeshift cannons. Empty soda cans became components for signal jammers, and coffee machines. Yes, coffee machines were modified to generate electromagnetic pulses capable of shorting out alien equipment. Coffee, in particular, became more than just a drink during this time. It symbolized resilience, focus, and determination. People joked that caffeine was humanity's secret weapon, keeping fighters alert through sleepless nights and long battles. In cities under siege, volunteers set up mobile coffee stations to keep morale high. Even soldiers carried thermoses, filled with the strong brew, swearing by its ability to sharpen their minds and steel their nerves. "One cup, one planet" became a rallying cry, painted on walls and whispered among comrades before daring missions. But while coffee fueled the spirit, strategy kept the fight alive. The observatory scientists leading the resistance realized early on that brute force alone wouldn't win this war. Humanity needed to outthink the Zetherians, exploiting their weaknesses and turning their own arrogance against them. This meant embracing chaos, a concept the aliens simply couldn't comprehend. One of the most effective strategies involved deception. Knowing the Zetherians valued efficiency above all else, the Resistance staged fake attacks across remote regions. Entire armies of decoys made from cardboard cutouts, holograms, and hacked drones tricked the invaders into wasting resources, defending empty deserts and frozen tundras. Meanwhile, real forces prepared for strikes on key targets closer to home. Another tactic focused on disrupting the aliens' communication networks. A team of hackers, working tirelessly in dimly lit rooms, managed to infiltrate the Zetherian systems again. They planted viruses designed to scramble transmissions and overload circuits. At first, these efforts only caused minor glitches, but over time, the cumulative effect left the invaders increasingly disoriented. Ships began misfiring weapons, patrols wandered aimlessly, and orders got delayed or lost entirely. On the ground, everyday citizens proved invaluable. In urban areas, people used social media platforms to share real-time updates about alien movements. One teenager live-streamed footage of an alien patrol entering his neighborhood, allowing nearby resistance fighters to ambush them. Elsewhere, farmers rigged irrigation systems to flood fields, creating muddy traps that slowed down enemy vehicles. Even children joined in, using slingshots to launch paintballs filled with reflective liquid onto alien sensors, blinding their drones temporarily. Despite these successes, the cost of resistance grew heavier each day. Cities lay in ruins, families were torn apart, and supplies dwindled. Yet, amid the destruction, humanity found moments of unity and inspiration. Strangers shared food and shelter, neighbors protected one another, and stories of heroism spread like wildfire. People reminded themselves why they were fighting, not just for survival, but for the future of their species. The turning point came when the Resistance discovered a critical flaw in the Zetherians' flagship, the massive mothership orbiting Earth. Buried deep within intercepted transmissions was evidence that the ship relied on a central power core vulnerable to electromagnetic interference. If humanity could disable this core, the entire fleet would be crippled. However, reaching the flagship seemed impossible. It floated far beyond Earth's atmosphere, guarded by swarms of smaller ships and surrounded by deadly asteroid fields rigged with automated turrets. Any approach would require navigating treacherous terrain while evading constant fire. Even the most experienced pilots balked at the idea. Undeterred, the Resistance devised a plan codenamed Galactic Brew. The mission called for sacrificing Earth's last functional space station, a relic of humanity's early attempts at space exploration, as a Trojan horse. Loaded with EMP devices, the station would be piloted directly into the asteroid field and detonated near the flagship. The resulting electromagnetic pulse would fry the mothership's systems, leaving it defenseless. Volunteers lined up to join the mission, knowing full well it was likely a one-way trip. Among them were a fearless pilot who had spent years flying experimental aircraft, a tech-savvy engineer skilled at modifying machinery under pressure, and a quick-thinking strategist adept at solving problems on the fly. Together, they formed a tight-knit crew, determined to see the mission through, no matter the cost. As preparations got underway, the rest of the Resistance launched a series of diversionary attacks to distract the Zetherians. Ground forces struck simultaneously in multiple locations, drawing attention away from the skies. Hackers unleashed a barrage of cyber attacks, flooding alien systems with false alarms and garbled messages. For a brief moment, chaos reigned supreme, buying precious time for the space team. Finally, the day of the mission arrived. The crew boarded the space station, hearts pounding with a mix of fear and resolve. As they launched into orbit, millions watched live broadcasts, holding their breath as the station hurtled toward the asteroid field. Inside, the team worked frantically to dodge incoming fire and navigate the labyrinth of rocks. Automated turrets fired relentlessly, forcing them to make split-second decisions that tested both their skills and their courage. Back on Earth, the observatory scientists coordinated the operation from a secure bunker, guiding the crew through the treacherous path. "You're almost there," they said over the comms, voice steady despite the tension. Just a little further. When the space station finally reached the flagship, the crew activated the MP devices and prepared to eject. But as they initiated the countdown, disaster struck. An alien fighter appeared out of nowhere, targeting the station with precision lasers. The hull breached, alarms blared, and oxygen levels plummeted. Time was running out. In those final moments, the crew made a choice. Rather than abandoning the mission, they stayed aboard, manually overriding the system to ensure the EMP detonated at the right distance. As the countdown hit 0, the station exploded in a brilliant flash of light, engulfing the flagship in a wave of electromagnetic energy. On Earth, the impact was immediate. Alien ships stalled mid-flight, their systems fried. Ground troops froze, unable to receive new orders. Cheers erupted around the globe as humanity celebrated a hard-fought victory. Though the price had been steep, the sacrifice ensured Earth's survival. The rebellion wasn't over yet, but for the first time since the invasion began, hope burned brighter than ever. Humanity had proven itself capable of standing toe-to-toe with an advanced alien race and winning. And as survivors raised cups of coffee in honor of those who gave everything, one thing became clear. The species that invented coffee and war wasn't going down without a fight. The explosion of the space station lit up Earth's sky like a second sun. For a brief moment, it felt as though the entire planet held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Then came the confirmation. Alien ships stalled mid-air, their sleek designs now useless hunks of metal floating silently in orbit. Ground forces froze, unable to move or communicate. Humanity had struck a crippling blow against this Etherian flagship, and for the first time since the invasion began, people dared to believe they might actually win. But victory was far from certain. The EMP blast had disabled many of the aliens' systems, but not all of them. Some ships remained operational, firing blindly in retaliation. Others began retreating into deep space, regrouping for another attempt at domination. Worse still, the Etherians weren't about to give up without one last desperate play. They activated their ultimate weapon, a gravity disruptor capable of tearing apart Earth's crust. News of the gravity disruptor spread quickly among the resistance. Scientists scrambled to understand how it worked, while military leaders debated countermeasures. Time was running out. Hours, maybe minutes, before the device could unleash catastrophic destruction. Entire continents would be swallowed by massive fissures. Oceans would surge uncontrollably, drowning cities beneath towering waves. If humanity didn't act fast, Earth itself would become uninhabitable. In the face of this new threat, the resistance rallied once more. People poured into makeshift command centers, offering whatever help they could. Engineers tinkered with salvaged alien tech, hoping to reverse engineer a solution. Farmers used tractors to dig trenches around towns, creating barriers against potential earthquakes. Even children pitched in, collecting supplies and spreading messages through social media networks. At the heart of the effort stood the observatory scientist who had been instrumental in decoding alien transmissions. Exhausted but determined, they pored over data, searching for any clue that might save the planet. Finally, buried within fragmented signals intercepted earlier, they found something: a blueprint of the gravity disruptor. It was incomplete, but enough to reveal a critical weakness. The device required immense amounts of energy to function and relied on a network of satellites orbiting Earth to amplify its power. This discovery sparked a bold plan. The resistance would launch a two-pronged attack. First, ground teams would sabotage key relay stations scattered across the globe, cutting off the disruptor's power supply. Second, a small group of pilots would fly stolen alien fighters into orbit, targeting the satellites directly. Both operations needed to happen simultaneously. If even one satellite remained active, the disruptor could still activate. Volunteers stepped forward immediately, knowing full well the risks involved. Pilots who had never flown anything more. Advanced and commercial jets trained frantically on captured alien ships, learning their controls through trial and error. Ground teams prepared for dangerous missions behind enemy lines, equipping themselves with improvised weapons and tools cobbled together from scrap metal and spare parts. As the clock ticked down, tension gripped everyone involved. In quiet moments, soldiers wrote letters to loved ones they might never see again. Civilians gathered in shelters, praying for survival. And yet, despite the fear, there was also a sense of purpose. Humanity had faced extinction before through plagues, natural disasters, and wars, and somehow always found a way to endure. This time would be no different. The operation began under cover of darkness. Ground teams moved swiftly, striking. Relay stations in coordinated assaults. Each station was heavily guarded, forcing fighters to rely on stealth and surprise. In some cases, civilians joined the fray, using cars and trucks to block roads and distract alien patrols. When brute force failed, ingenuity took over. One team used mirrors to reflect sunlight onto sensors, temporarily blinding drones long enough to disable them. Meanwhile, high above Earth, the pilots faced their own challenges. Flying alien ships was unlike anything they'd ever experienced. The controls responded unpredictably, and the vessels were designed for beings much larger and stronger than humans. Every maneuver pushed the pilots to their limits, testing both their skill and endurance. Yet they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that failure meant the end of everything. One pilot, a former test flyer known for taking risks, led the charge. Their ship darted between enemy fighters, narrowly avoiding laser fire while launching missiles at the satellites. Behind them, other pilots followed suit, working together to clear a path toward the remaining targets. Explosions lit up the void of space as satellites shattered into fragments, drifting harmlessly away. Back on Earth, the ground teams reported success after success. Relay stations fell one by one, severing the disruptor's connection to its power source. But the Zetherians weren't idle. Realizing their weapon was in jeopardy, they launched a counterattack, deploying reinforcements to protect the final few stations. The battle intensified, with both sides fighting fiercely for control. It was during this chaotic climax that ordinary people shone brightest. A farmer used his tractor to ram an alien vehicle, blocking a team's escape route. A teenager hacked into a nearby security system, disabling cameras and giving resistance fighters precious seconds to slip past undetected one. Even baristas brewed endless pots of coffee, keeping exhausted troops awake and focused. Finally, with just minutes to spare, the last relay station went dark. Moments later, reports came in from orbit the final satellite had been destroyed. Without its amplification network, the gravity disruptor sputtered and died, its threat neutralized. Across the globe, cheers erupted as humanity celebrated another miraculous victory. Yet the cost had been staggering. Cities lay in ruins, countless lives lost, and scars ran deep. Families mourned loved ones who had given everything to protect the future. But amidst the grief, there was also pride. Humanity had proven itself capable of standing against an enemy far superior in technology and strength. They had won not through brute force, but through creativity, determination, and sheer willpower. As the dust settled, the observatory scientist reflected on what had happened. What started as a quiet discovery in a remote observatory had grown into a global movement, uniting billions of people in a shared struggle for survival. Coffee, once dismissed as a trivial habit by the Zetherians, had become a symbol of resilience. Reminder that even in the darkest times, humanity could find ways to persevere. And so, as the remnants of this Etherian fleet retreated into the depths of space, humanity looked toward the future. The war was over, but the lessons learned would shape generations to come. Never again would Earth underestimate the power of unity, the strength of a species that thrived on chaos, adaptability, and hope. The war was over, but its echoes lingered long after the Zetherians vanished into the stars. Their retreat wasn't graceful, it was a panicked scramble. Their once mighty fleet reduced to scattered ships limping away from Earth. For the first time in months, the skies above humanity's cities were clear. The diamond-shaped vessels no longer cast ominous shadows, and the hum of alien engines faded into silence. Yet, the scars left behind told a story that would never be forgotten. Earth bore the marks of battle, like an old soldier-crumbled buildings, charred landscapes, and streets lined with makeshift memorials for those who had fallen. Entire neighborhoods lay in ruins, their rubble serving as a grim reminder of the cost of survival. But amid the destruction, something remarkable emerged. People began rebuilding not just homes and roads, but connections. Strangers became neighbors again, sharing meals and stories around campfires lit in the ruins. Communities came together, driven by a shared sense of purpose and gratitude for what remained. For all the pain and loss, humanity had gained something invaluable: unity. Old rivalries between nations seemed petty now, overshadowed by the realization that Earth was one planet, inhabited by one species. Governments set aside decades of distrust and formed a global council dedicated to protecting their world and preparing for whatever might come next. It wasn't perfect. Disagreements still flared, and tensions occasionally bubbled over. But for the first time in history, humanity acted as a single entity, united not by fear, but by hope. The observatory scientist who had played such a pivotal role in decoding the alien signals became a reluctant hero. They didn't seek fame or recognition, but people needed someone to look up to, a symbol of the brilliance and determination that had saved them. When asked about their contribution during interviews, the scientists shrugged modestly. "I just did my job," they said. The real heroes are everyone else, the ones who kept going when things looked impossible. Coffee, which had fueled countless sleepless nights during the war, became more than a drink. It became a cultural touchstone. Cafes reopened in bombed-out districts, their owners determined to bring warmth and comfort back to shattered communities. Baristas served cups emblazoned with phrases like "one cup, one planet," and "brewing hope since insert year here." Even astronauts aboard the International Space Station brewed coffee using zero-gravity machines, sending photos back to Earth as a reminder that life continued, even in the harshest conditions. But humanity didn't stop at rebuilding. They pushed forward. Inspired by the ingenuity that had defeated the Zetherians, scientists turned their attention to space exploration. Engineers studied captured alien tech, reverse engineering it to create faster, stronger spacecraft. Pilots trained rigorously, eager to venture beyond Earth's orbit and explore the stars. Humanity realized that staying on one planet made them vulnerable. If they wanted to survive future threats, they needed to spread out, to colonize other worlds, and ensure their species' longevity. One of the most ambitious projects born from this effort was Galactic Brew, named after the daring mission that had crippled the Zetherian flagship. It wasn't just a spaceship, it was a symbol of humanity's newfound resolve. Designed to carry both passengers and supplies, Galactic Brew was built to withstand the challenges of deep space travel. Its maiden voyage aimed to reach Mars, where colonies were already being planned. Volunteers poured in from every corner of the globe, willing to risk everything for the chance to step onto another world. Back on Earth, schools began teaching lessons about the war, not just the battles, but the creativity and courage that had defined humanity's response. Children learned how ordinary people had risen to extraordinary heights, turning everyday objects into tools of resistance. Teachers emphasized the importance of adaptability, teamwork, and thinking outside the box. After all, these were the traits that had saved the planet. Artists captured the spirit of the era in murals, films, and songs. One particularly popular song featured lyrics inspired by the phrase, "coffee and chaos." It spoke of late-night brainstorming sessions, desperate gambles, and the stubborn refusal to give up. Another artist created a massive sculpture made entirely of salvaged alien metal, titled Resilience. Standing tall in the heart of a rebuilt city, it reminded passers-by of what humanity had overcome and what they could achieve if they stayed united. As years passed, humanity ventured further into space. Colonies sprang up on Mars, then Europa, and eventually distant moons orbiting gas giants. Each settlement carried pieces of Earth's culture, including its love for coffee. Roasting beans in low gravity became a science experiment turned art form, with baristas crafting drinks tailored to each colony's unique environment. Explorers joked that wherever humans went, coffee followed, and maybe that was true. The Cytherians, meanwhile, disappeared deeper into the galaxy, licking their wounds and questioning their assumptions. Word of their defeat spread among other alien civilizations, sparking curiosity and caution. Many wondered how such a seemingly primitive species had managed to triumph against overwhelming odds. Some speculated that humanity's unpredictability was its greatest strength. Others marveled at their ability to adapt, innovate, and persevere. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear: humanity was no longer seen as insignificant. Decades later, as humanity stood on the brink of becoming an interstellar civilization, they paused to reflect on the lessons of their past. They remembered the sacrifices made, the friendships forged, and the moments of brilliance that had turned despair into victory. They also acknowledged their flaws, the divisions, the conflicts, the mistakes, but vowed to learn from them rather than repeat them. And so, as ships launched toward distant stars, carrying the hopes and dreams of billions, humanity carried something else too, a legacy of resilience. They had faced annihilation and emerged stronger, proving that even in the darkest times, there was always a way forward. Whether it was through the power of caffeine, the bonds of community, or the sheer determination to keep fighting, humanity had shown itself capable of greatness. In the end, the Cytherians hadn't just underestimated humanity, had awakened it. By dismissing the species that invented coffee and war, they had ignited a fire that would burn brightly across the cosmos. And as humanity reached for the stars, they carried with them a simple truth: no matter how vast the universe, nothing could match the indomitable spirit of a species that thrived on chaos, creativity, and hope.